Thank you for joining us this evening. Each of you should have gotten a piece of paper and a pen or pencil to write questions. We decided instead of passing around a mic and using up time, we're going to collect your questions after Jeff speaks. You can pass them to the center aisle or off to the side here, and we'll collect them, and I'll read and some other people will read questions to Jeff. And tell me your names again. Matt Lopez and Alan Black are also here, so they'll field questions as well. So now I'd like to introduce our pastor, Nora Fitch. Come on up.
I was talking.
You were.
On behalf of the congregation of St. Thomas, I want to welcome everybody here this evening. I'm Nora Fitch. I'm the head pastor, Jonathan just said, and Jonathan Britt is the associate pastor here at St. Thomas. It's a great congregation, and I see quite a few of our members here, and we are delighted to have you. I want to begin with prayer. Let us pray. Lord, open unto me light for my darkness. Open unto me courage for my fear. Open unto me hope for my despair. Open unto me peace for my turmoil. Open unto me joy for my sorrow. Open unto me strength for my weakness. Open unto me wisdom for my confusion. Open unto me forgiveness for my sins. Open unto me love for my hates. Open unto me thyself for myself. Lord, Lord, open unto me. And we all say, amen. It is my pleasure this evening to introduce Jeff Lindner. I know probably all of y'all, like I did, watched Jeff during the rain, and the rain went on and on and on. I live in Missouri City. I don't live right around here, but we had to mandatorily evacuate our neighborhood. So we went to a hotel where you could get no food and no room service and no nothing. All you could do was watch the rain and watch the TV, right? And every time Jeff would come on, I felt like it was somebody I could trust. He's going to tell us the truth. And so I do feel very strongly that you helped us get through that storm. So we are delighted to have Jeff here this evening. Jeffrey received his degree in meteorology from A&M. He interned with the Harris County Flood Control District for a year and then became a full-time employee after his graduation in 2003. And we are so grateful that he is here this evening to visit with us and share his experiences of the flood, the Harvey flood. Help me welcome him.
Yep. She brought up these people in the front, their names. Who are they with?
They're with the Harris County Flood Control District.
Okay.
We have Alan Black, who is the director of our engineering department, and Matt Lopez, who is Precinct 3 coordinator. Thank you. Can we lower the lights a little bit? All right. So, okay. We got to go higher? Okay, higher, they're telling me. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the storm. I'm going to talk about how much it rained, what some of our operations were, and at the end we'll have questions and answers. Okay? All right, so I'll direct your attention to the TVs here. I start out with the hydrology in Harris County. We have 22 watersheds in Harris County, and most of our water, all of our water in Harris County drains from west to east and ends up in Galveston Bay or the San Jacinto River. And this was one of the big misconceptions we had back on the tax day storm up in northwest Harris County, is all that water is going to come down and go to downtown Houston, when in fact all of that water that falls up in that part of the county ends up in the West Fork of the San Jacinto River. Next slide. Of course, most of y'all know there are 2 flood control reservoirs in Harris County, Addicks and Barker. They are operated and maintained by the Army Corps of Engineers. They were built in the 1940s for flood protection along Buffalo Bayou, including downtown Houston. Of course, in the 1940s when they were built, they were way out in the middle of nowhere. And of course, as development has happened, those reservoirs have become part of the city. Next slide. So this is a track of Harvey, initially becoming a tropical storm in the eastern Caribbean Sea, and then it fell apart and redeveloped in the Gulf of Mexico, went from a tropical depression to a Category 4 hurricane in 48 hours. So that's something to keep in mind, is we can get rapid intensification in the Gulf of Mexico. It happens from time to time. Made landfall near the mid-Texas coast, moved inland, stalled, and then moved back off the coast and move up the coast. Next. And this was the forecast on Saturday morning, August the 26th. And as you can see, the rainfall forecasts for Harvey were actually very good. The comprehension of the rainfall forecast, both from us as meteorologists and probably you as the public, was what in the world does 3 and 4 feet of rain look like? And that was something that we've never really experienced before here. Even if you look at Tropical Storm Allison, Allison was one portion of the county. It was one area. It wasn't the whole county. It wasn't the whole region. And to be honest with you, when we were looking at the forecasting going into Harvey, a lot of us thought that that's how this was going to play out. One portion of the area would get a lot of rain, but not the whole area. Of course, in hindsight, the whole area got a lot of rain. Next slide. So this is the landfall. This was Friday evening, August the 25th, a strengthening Category 4 hurricane into the mid-Texas coast. This is the strongest hurricane to make landfall in Texas since Hurricane Carla back in 1961, which made landfall around the Port O'Connor area. The deadliest hurricane to strike the state since 1919. 68 direct fatalities from Harvey, and all of those were inland freshwater flood fatalities. Go ahead. So all day Friday, Friday night, and all day Saturday, we were fine up here on the upper Texas coast in Houston, Galveston. We had rain, anywhere from 2 to 5 inches, but things went bad starting on Saturday night around 9 o'clock, and it all started from a single feeder band that developed out in western Harris County, Fort Bend and Brazoria counties, and that feeder band slowly moved across Harris County during the overnight hours into Sunday morning. And that feeder band produced anywhere from 4 to 7 inches of rain per hour across Harris County. Remember, it moved from west to east, so it is moving downstream with the direction that our water flows in this county. So very similar to the Tax Day flood, the Memorial Day flood of 15, you dump in the heavy rain on the headwaters, and then that water is flowing through the county, and the rain's moving downstream with it. Notice the center of the circulation is northwest of Victoria, so about 140 miles away from us. And so that's important, that the storm doesn't necessarily have to make landfall right on top of us for us to get impacts. And you can see that here in this radar image. Go ahead. One of the things we faced with Harvey that we've never really faced before here was life-threatening flooding developing in homes. And this was on Sunday morning, about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. We started to get a very large influx of 911 calls into our 911 center saying, people were saying, I'm going to drown in my house. And that's pretty rare for us. The only other time we've had flooding of that magnitude was Tropical Storm Allison back in 2001, and that was really in specific areas of the county. But in this case, this was a very large area, mainly of southeast Harris County around Pasadena, South Houston, where the water was getting very deep in homes. And so we coordinated with our fire rescue partners on what the message is that they wanted us to push out. And one of the things we do very well here is we can coordinate very well with our media partners. And so we can put something out on this called NWS Chat. We pushed this out that morning and said we want people to go to their roofs. We did not want people going into their attics. We learned from Hurricane Katrina back in 2005, if people go into their attics, there is no way to get out of your attic if the water keeps rising. Additionally, from a rescue standpoint, we cannot see you from a helicopter or boat if you're in your attic. So that is why we ask people to go to their roofs. Next. This is our flood warning system. How many of you are aware of our flood warning system? This is our gauge network. Good deal. So this is what it looked like at 10 o'clock Sunday morning. Everything you see in red is major flood conditions across all of Harris County and into the surrounding county. So it wasn't just Harris County at this point. This was Montgomery, Waller, Fort Bend, Galveston. 80% of the city of Dickinson at this point was underwater. 80%. Go ahead. There was also the realization at this point that there were no longer any government resources available. Every government resource that we had available, every boat, every high water vehicle, every fire truck had been deployed. We took 53,000 911 calls in 15 hours on Saturday night into Sunday morning. For the first time ever, we could not utilize our 22 freeways. Not a single freeway was open. We could not bring resources in from outside. And so Judge Emmett made the decision to go out and ask for civilian help. And he's taken some heat for that, especially from other areas of the country that don't realize what we do here. And there's two things that kind of go into this. One, people were already going out in boats and rescuing people because that's what we do, because we're Texans, and that's what we're going to do. And then the second is we needed to try to coordinate that effort. So first responders were not going to be showing up at someone's house where somebody down the street picked them up with a boat. And so we were working on coordinating that effort, and you can see there in the wall of the Emergency Operations Center, the way we did that is we divided the county into quadrants, and as field command centers developed as the flooding moved around, we used Post-it notes to indicate the people that were willing to go out and help rescue people. And we did this for almost 3 days straight. People were calling in, and they got even more, I wouldn't say confusing, but more difficult as out-of-state help came into the area. Go ahead. One other thing we did that a lot of people don't necessarily know about is we were landing helicopters on US 59 outside the GRB roughly every 8 minutes. Because since we could not utilize our freeway system, the plan was to get people from their homes to a freeway overpass, land a helicopter, pick them up, take them to the GRB, or to the US 59, drop them off at the GRB. That was our first mass shelter that was established. The GRB filled to capacity in 8 hours, and that is when the overflow shelter at NRG was set up. Go ahead. So these are some of the rainfall numbers. The 1 hour rainfall rate of 6.8 inches, almost a foot in 2 hours. And to be honest, I don't care how great the drainage system is, there are no drainage systems that can handle 12 inches of rain in 2 hours. It literally overwhelmed both the primary, the street and gutter, roadside ditch systems, and our channel system. And the difference between Harvey and anything else we've ever faced was that it just kept coming. We got 2 feet of rain-ish in 24 hours. If you think back to tax day, all of the rain happened in 12 hours and it stopped. It didn't rain anymore. Harvey, we got another foot, 34 inches in 2 days, and the maximum total of 47.4 in 4 days. 4 feet of rain in 4 days. Those totals you see at the bottom are other areas across southeast Texas. So the maximum rainfall total was 60.58 inches. Nederland, Texas, that's in Jefferson County, just south of Beaumont, Port Arthur. And you see a lot of those 50 plus there along the Gulf Freeway down in Galveston County. Each one of those numbers breaks the previous tropical cyclone American history rainfall record of 48 inches. I put that on there. There's 32 other ones that break that record just with Harvey. This is Buffalo. I put Buffalo on here since most of you from the Buffalo Bayou watershed, you can't really see it. Buffalo's the kind of darker green colored watershed. And then you have Addicks in the lighter green to the north and Barker out to the west in the orangish color. The rainfall totals across Buffalo Bayou generally averaged from about 28, 29 inches up to about 35. So that was the rainfall amount over the 4-day period that you had along Buffalo Bayou. The 40-plus inches of rain was down really in the southeast part of Harris County. Go ahead. So, of course, a lot of us were probably here for Tropical Storm Allison, or some of us were. Allison was really our benchmark storm. I don't think most of us could imagine, after Allison, a storm worse than Allison. And then we had Harvey. And as you can see, Allison there actually still has more intense rainfall in the 6, 12, and 24-hour period than Harvey. But where Harvey exceeds everything is in those 2- and 4-day periods where it just kept raining. We kept piling on the water. I put tax day up there. You can see almost all of tax day's rain fell in 12 hours. So an intense dump of rain, and then it stopped. It's a little bit different from Harvey. Harvey, we had both. We had an intense rainfall on Friday night, or on Saturday night into Sunday morning, and then we kept adding the rain to it. And I put October 1994. How many of you were here in October 1994? Does anybody remember the flooding that happened in 94? This is when the San Jacinto River had the pipelines rupture and it caught on fire and all that. The totals fall short. But the spatial coverage, how large of an area that got a lot of rain, is actually pretty similar in October 1994 to Harvey. Next. And there's that footprint. Everything you see in that black box is 30 inches. So from the Sabine down to the Colorado, and from the coast up to about Conroe, had 30 inches of rain. Never before have we seen a storm drop that much rain over that big of an area. And everything you see in yellow there is 15 to 20 inches. So from west central Louisiana all the way down to near Victoria and all the way up to Bastrop. So it wasn't just Harris County. It wasn't just the watersheds in Harris County. It was the Brazos, the San Bernard, the Colorado, the Navasota, the Trinity, all had either record or near record flooding from Harvey. Next. And this really drives home, I think, the point of how historic Harvey was. Because after Harvey, what I've heard a lot of, it rained 50 inches. But that's an extraordinary amount of water. And it's an extraordinary amount of water over a large area. So these are the worst rainfall events in American history dating back to 1851. These are the greatest amounts of rain over a 2,000 square mile area in a 5-day period. And the previous biggest, largest, worst, whatever you want to call it, rainfall event in American history before Harvey was in the state of Louisiana in 1940, and over 2,000 square miles in 5 days it produced 29.8 inches of rain. Over 5 days and 2,000 square miles, Harvey produced 43.69 inches. Harvey exceeded the previous greatest rainfall event in American history by 14 inches. You honestly could not have dreamed up Harvey. Go ahead. This is the same thing. This is over 10,000 square miles, 5-day period. Harvey produced almost 35 inches of rain over 10,000 square miles. It exceeded the previous worst storm again, state of Louisiana, by 62%. Go ahead. So directly for Harris County, we had 1 trillion gallons of waterfall in a 4-day period. On average, the entire county had just short of 34 inches of rain. That's 68% of our yearly total in 4 days. And it's 69% of what we call the PMP. And the PMP is simply what we physically thought could fall out of the sky in a 4-day period. And here we thought it was about 48 inches before Harvey. Clearly, you saw over in Beaumont, Port Arthur, where it rained 60.5. That PMP is not right for our area. It has rained more than that. And that 47.4 down on Clear Creek was 95% of what we physically thought could fall out of the sky. So this is, Harvey was bordering on what we theoretically even thought could happen. And then it exceeded it. It went beyond it. Go ahead. So one of the things we've heard a lot about is the return frequency. And this is the rainfall return frequency. So I've heard a lot of, we've had 300-year floods in the last year. And I just had a 100-year flood, so I will not be around for the next one. That's not how it works. The 100-year rainfall for Harris County is about 13.2 inches for a 24-hour period. And that has statistically a 1% chance of happening in any given year. So if it rains 13.2 inches in a backyard in Cyprus, they had a 100-year flood. They had a 100-year rainfall. That's what fell out of the sky. If it rains 6.8 inches in your backyard in this area, you did not have a 100-year rainfall. But what we have gotten in the habit of is classifying that greatest rainfall as the whole event. So the tax day storm was a 500-year rainfall in a portion of eastern Waller County, but everybody who got rain on the tax day storm assumes that they had a 100-year rainfall. And that's just not right. That's not correct. And so that is one of the kind of misconceptions we've had about what we've gone through in the last 3 years. And we've gone through a lot in the last 3 years here. This is the storm total. This is the 4-day storm totals for Harvey. And the entire county had between a 2 and a 5,000-year return frequency of the rainfall, which means it has an extremely small chance of happening in any given year. And down in the southeast part of the county, in that dark purple, that's about a 20,000-year return frequency. Now, granted, we're taking 150 years of record and extended it out to roughly 20,000 years, so there's probably a little bit of error there. Go ahead. The other thing is what the water does once it's on the ground. So once it is in the channels, the creeks and the bayous, there is a return frequency of that also. So this is where that 100-year flood elevation, 100-year floodplain comes into play. So everything you see in red, the creek or the bayou rose to the 100-year water surface elevation or higher. Everything you see in purple, the water rose above the 500-year elevation. So there's a large portion of Harris County that had water surface elevations above their 100, and in some cases their 500-year elevations, and in many cases it was feet above the 500-year elevations. Go ahead. So one thing I did was, what is Harvey for the records? So we had 13 of 22 watersheds set record flood levels. Everything you see in orange was a record. It's the highest the water's ever been, at least that we know about. Two things I'll point out. One, kind of in the northern part of the county, that was all tax day, and the reservoirs, tax day 16. So back-to-back historic big floods a year apart. If you look over on the east side of the county, that was all October 1994. That was the previous record that Harvey exceeded. Clear Creek down in the south was Claudette 1979. That was when it rained 43 inches down in Alvin. And Tropical Storm Allison is kind of that strip up there on the east side in the middle. But notice the large portions of the county that did not, Harvey is not the record. That means the water has actually been higher. And I don't know how many people have told me after Harvey, if I didn't flood during Harvey, I'm never going to flood. This graphic says otherwise. For example, Jersey Village. Not a single house flooded in Jersey Village in Harvey, but 350 flooded on tax day. It's just how the rain falls. On tax day, remember how I showed that graphic? It was intense. It was all at once. It overwhelmed the drainage systems. But in Jersey Village with Harvey, they had just enough breaks between the rain that it allowed the water to stay below flooding of the homes. Every storm is different. And you cannot say because I did or did not flood in this storm, I will or will not flood in the next one. Go ahead. So I'm going to take you through some images. This is Buffalo Bayou. These are the high water marks we had on Buffalo Bayou. For the most part, the previous record on Buffalo Bayou was April 2009. And the previous record on Buffalo Bayou before April 2009 was March of 1992. And as you can see with Harvey up there, 71.6 feet or so was roughly 6 feet above the previous record of April 2009. Absolutely devastating flooding along Buffalo Bayou. There was sort of two floods, if you will, on Buffalo Bayou. There was the initial rainfall event that happened Saturday night and Sunday morning, and we had over 500-year water levels on Buffalo Bayou from roughly the West Belt downstream into downtown Houston. So there were significant amounts of flooding on that Sunday. And then upstream of Beltway and upstream of Gessner, those water levels reached their peak based on the releases from Addicks and Barker reservoirs. Go ahead. I wish this was bigger. This shows all of our high water marks that we've ever taken along Buffalo Bayou. So this is your historic period of record for pretty much we have most bridges from downtown Houston all the way up to Highway 6. And as you can see over there, the red indicates what's the record. Harvey is by far the record at every single bridge on Buffalo Bayou. So this was by far the highest event on Buffalo. Go ahead. One other this is, I think, one of the most powerful graphics showing from Harvey. This is the tide gauge in the Houston Ship Channel at Manchester. This is at 6:10. And the top graph is Hurricane Ike's saltwater storm surge that came up the Houston Ship Channel in 2008, reached 12.34 feet. And that bottom graph is Harvey's freshwater runoff that almost equaled Hurricane Ike's seawater storm surge. Notice the difference in the graphs. The red is a peak, so the water came up and it went back out in the storm surge. Look how much water passed through the ship channel. Look how large that green section is at the bottom. This was all Buffalo, White Oak, Greens Bayou, Brays Bayou, Sims Bayou, all dumping that water into the ship channel. Go ahead. So we have the upstream condition. Obviously, upstream of here is Addicks and Barker reservoirs. This was the situation in Addicks. The previous record in Addicks was 102.65 feet, tax day of 2016. And that pretty much is right at the edge of government-owned land. So once the pool elevation exceeds around 102.5 or so, water begins to spill off government-owned land and into the subdivisions that have been developed on the back west side of the reservoir lands. And technically, those subdivisions are located within the flood pool of the reservoir. And then Harvey went to 109.1, 6.5 feet or so higher than tax day. And there was devastating flooding on the backside of the reservoir in the flood pool. Go ahead. One of the situations, the way these reservoirs are designed, they have two spillways, one at each end of the reservoir where the dam ties back into the natural ground. And around here, because we don't have a lot of elevation, there's no, quote, high ground to tie the end of the dam into. So it just ties back in to the natural ground. And you can see that in that bottom photo there where you have that little concrete strip and then there's that building right at the end of it. That's where that ties back into the ground. And the elevation of that natural ground at the end of that spillway is around 108 feet. And again, Addicks went to 109.1. So water came out of the reservoir, flowed around the end of that spillway, and then began to make its way down to Buffalo Bayou. And we weren't really sure how exactly that was going to work, because at first it's never happened before. And second, you can see in those photos there's a lot of things happening. You have subdivisions, you have commercial developments, you have roadway systems, you have detention basins, you have roadside ditches, and you have underground drainage systems. And so as this water begins to spill out, how is it going to interact with all of those features? That model you see there on the right was what the Corps of Engineers initially forecast the reservoir to go to, which was 112 feet. We were very fortunate we did not get to the 112 feet. But as you can see, water would have poured out of that north end spillway. It would have inundated all the structures between the Beltway and the dam all the way down to Buffalo Bayou. And the under system would have still not had enough capacity to absorb it. The water would have flowed through the Beltway underpasses, through Spring Branch, and then into Buffalo Bayou a little bit further downstream. When the spillways are engaged on Addicks, all of that water still comes to Buffalo Bayou. When the north end spillway of Barker is engaged, that water would come to Buffalo Bayou also. The south end spillway engagement of Barker, that water would actually go to Oyster Creek and Sugarland and the very upper portion of Brays Bayou. So that's what would happen if water spilled out of these reservoirs on its own. And this is what we were talking about, the difference between controlled and uncontrolled flow out of the reservoir. The controlled flow was what was coming through the floodgates of the reservoir. This particular engagement here of the north end spillway is uncontrolled. As you can see, water's coming out. No one has control over it. No one has control where it's going or what it's affecting or how it's moving. But the controlment was what was happening at the floodgates at the dam. Go ahead. This was Barker. Again, 6.5 feet over the previous record. It's interesting that both of the reservoir pools were exactly 6.5 feet almost above their tax day records. And that's because the rainfall across the watersheds were virtually the same, between about 28-ish and about 34 inches of rain across both of those reservoirs. Go ahead. So the damage, 300,000 vehicles just in Harris County alone were inundated. Across the state, it's about 600,000. Harvey will be number 2 to Hurricane Katrina as the second costliest natural disaster in American history. Katrina is $160 billion. Harvey will come in at $125. 60,000 persons are rescued by government resources over the course of the week or so. And we estimate somewhere between 30 and 40,000 were rescued by civilian resources. And we'll honestly never know the number. People weren't keeping tabs of it when they were pulling people on their own boats. Go ahead. Harvey is by far the most devastating structure flood event we've ever faced in this county. 154,170 homes, that's homes, flooded. Allison was 73,000, over double. That's 11% of the total number of structures in this county. 105, 340 of those homes were outside the 100-year floodplain. They were not required to have flood insurance. Of the 154, 170, 36% had flood insurance. The average payout for a FEMA flood insurance claim for Harvey is $120,000. The average payout for an individual who got individual assistance from FEMA, so this is someone who flooded who did not have flood insurance, the average payout is $4,000 to $7,000. I need y'all to take those statistics with y'all, and I need you to tell people the importance of flood insurance. A couple things I want to point out on this map. Notice the very intense areas, the globs, if you will, of red. You see that a lot in the Meyerland, Brays Bayou area. You see it along Buffalo. You see it along Cypress Creek, back in the reservoirs down in the southeast part of the county. That's very clearly the channel flooding. So pretty much every house in that area was inundated with water. Notice the speckled type look in some of the Spring Branch area up in the north central part of the county. It gets kind of spotted looking. That is flooding from the internal drainage system, your street system, overwhelmed. And in a lot of those cases, it was very shallow flooding. It was only 6 inches or 4 inches. Still very damaging. Any water in a house is damaging. But it's very shallow. It comes in, it wets what it's going to do, and it goes back out. It's usually very quick. It only lasts 6, 8, 12 hours. But that different type of flooding actually shows up here on the map. In most of those places, away from the channels, people were completely and have been unaware that they could flood. And they did not have flood insurance. Every single person in this county can flood. I can flood. I did flood. I flooded in Allison at 3 feet. So I know what it's like. But just because if you didn't flood during Harvey or an area didn't flood doesn't mean you can't flood in the future. Go ahead. With that, I'll open it up to questions. Again, we have Alan Black and Matt Lopez here to help answer.